This is Ed, and I'm not on the water. This is a picture I took, and as you could see, there's a dolphin jumping out of the water. So you have to ask yourself, is this a trick photo? No, it's a real photo that I took a couple of years ago, but it still fascinates me. And what's really happening is this is a specially trained dolphin. It's part of the U.S. Navy SEALs. And across the bay there, you can see part of the Naval Air Station, the Navy base. San Diego is the headquarters for the Pacific Fleet. They have sub-headquarters, subs not meaning just submarines, but smaller headquarters in different places, like Honolulu, for instance, in Guam, um, and some other places. But San Diego is the administrative lead. I call it Pentagon West. In fact, just down the street from where I'm situated at this moment is the headquarters area. It's right by Seaport Village and the Embarcadero. It's a fancy word for where the cruise ships come in. It's a big tourist area. And we're also just adjacent, speaking about tourists, to the San Diego Convention Center and the major hotels surrounding that, including Hyatt, Hilton, Marriott, and of course some others, and the famous gas lamp district. But right here you see a Navy SEAL operative training the dolphin to keep them ready to go when they're needed in a military situation. Fascinating picture though, isn't it? So our special guest today is Chase Eskelsen. He has a master in education. He's the owner, the founder of micro schools. This is public education. It's really fascinating what he's doing, trying to improve teaching, improve kids' lives with more personalized, more hands-on, smaller classes to some extent, but more focused attention on kids. So he calls himself a micro school dude. He's the firm's founder and owner. And also he's a parent advocate, and he does have kids too. So I'm going to read this from his LinkedIn. Chase Eskelsen says, I have a very non-traditional career trajectory. It's a big word. The long story in a short list. Okay, school administrator focused on increasing enrollment from about 1,400 to 8,000. That's a big jump. School administrator focused on operational effectiveness and SOP creation. What's SOP? Standard operating procedure? We'll ask him to define that. School administrator focused on launching a new district digital program. And they enrolled in that, guess how many? 6,000. Can you imagine? Okay, he also writes here in this LinkedIn, involved with academic policy, and that includes research, public affairs, government affairs across the nation. He's a national director of the board and in policy relations for $1 billion ed tech company. Now, my name's Ed, but I'm not involved in that. Just want to make it clear. Okay, he is the COO, Chief Operating Officer of an education nonprofit, launched hybrid programs across the U.S., and also acquired a private K through 12 school. He's in the Dallas area of Texas. I assume it's right around there. We'll ask him about all that. So he writes, because of this, FERSKENED, FERSKENED, FERSKEN, and then capital E, capital D, FERSKENED, is in a unique position to support educators, ed tech, entrepreneurs, schools, and nonprofits. This is an education business. Instead of being asked, what can you do for us? He says he likes to ask, what do you need? He says, we either have experience there or we know someone who can help. That's Chase Eskelsen. Can do, will do, get it done. We'll be right back with our special guest, Chase Eskelsen, and about what parents need to know. Are you ready? School administrators and teachers know when parents are not helping the kids when they're at home, not helping the kids continue their learning. We're going to get into that. Okay, hi, we're live, and here's Chase Eskelsen, Master of Education, FERSKENED. Tell the audience what FERSKENED is today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me back, Ed. Always a good time to be with you. FERSKENED is an education firm that we focus on helping schools and education businesses grow and scale and enroll new students and to educate students appropriately. So we do all kinds of fun stuff in the education world.
Okay, so you are involved on a national level as well as in Dallas, but you help entrepreneurs who buy or start a micro school?
Yeah, one of the things that we really focus on heavily through the FERSKENED side is helping those folks who are launching new micro schools get those puppies up and off the ground. Across the nation right now, we're seeing education savings accounts, vouchers, and tax credit scholarships, which are all three very different things, but they're popping up. And as of this last legislative session, over 50% of all students in the United States now have access to these types of funds to help them go to a private school or a micro school or any type of school that they want. So it's opening up lots of doors, and it's putting parents back in the driver's seat of their kiddos' education, which is way cool. And so we help the entrepreneurs as they're launching these new types of schools. And and your listeners, I'm sure, if they want to, can go back to some of our older conversations where my background is in virtual education and hybrid education and launching new school programs. And so that's what we do, is we help people do that. And we're also right in the same boat with them. We're not a think tank. We're not a theory group. We're practical. We do this right alongside all the other micro school people. And we've actually launched a couple of micro schools in our network right here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So it's pretty cool.
So how does this relate to charter schools?
Yeah, good question. So charter schools started back in the late 90s, and it's interesting because there's some nuance to this. Charter schools are technically public schools, and the government dollars flow to a charter school in a similar way that it flows to a traditional district program. And some charter schools are launching micro schools, some charter schools are full-time online, and some charter schools are hybrid. But private schools then would be separate, and this is newer through the three vehicles that I talked about before: ESAs, vouchers, and tax credit scholarships. And so it is different, but they're all closely aligned in that they're all educating students. It's just where's the funding coming from and how does it flow from your taxpayer dollars in the United States to the schools of choice. And slightly different, but it's really cool that we're opening up lots of new opportunities for families. And I'll tell you this, and because you know me, I'm a school choice purist. And we've talked about this before. I believe that every school needs to be protected. And I love talking to families with 2, 3, 4 kids. And they say, well, I've got one kid who's in the traditional district. I've got one kid who's in the full-time online school. I'm homeschooling one kid. And I've got one kid in a charter school. That to me is ideal because we're finding the right fit for every kid instead of cramming every kid into a one-size-fits-all, which we all know that doesn't exist.
It's fascinating. So how much time do you have? 15 minutes or so?
Yeah, I can do 15, 20 minutes.
Okay, good. Okay. You had sent me some information here. We just practice full disclosure to the audience here. This is not scripted, but we do have talking points, of course. And we do that on purpose because we're human, not a robot. Although I love Gemini. Have you used Gemini yet on Google?
I have not, no.
No, it's terrific. It's really easy, and Gemini is very prolific. So I asked Gemini, I fed in some of the stuff that you had sent me. This is about about 2 hours ago. And so Gemini sent me back stuff without belaboring the point. Okay. The idea of personalized education, which was one of your pet things, right? And so Gemini says, shaping education around, now this is a robot, right? Okay. Shaping education around the individual student through small class sizes, personal relationships, and custom pacing. This has been your thing forever.
Yeah, it's definitely not a new idea, but it's coming into its own through a new renaissance all over again. And the thing that I love about micro schools specifically on this topic is, and I like to, let me give a disclaimer first. Can I give a disclaimer? There are good people in all the different schools, right? There are great teachers in the traditional district schools just down the street from your house. The unfortunate thing is the way that those are structured is they're not designed in a way that those teachers can effectively customize or personalize the learning experience. Why? It's not because the teacher's not good. It's not because the teacher doesn't want to. It's because there's too many kids in the class to do it effectively. And so when you're in a classroom with 30 kids, you can only adjust so much. And there's great ways to do it. And many, many great public school teachers who say, we're going to break into station rotation model. We're going to do some really cool things for these kids. But that's what I love about the micro school movement is it's built to be small on purpose, and you can actually personalize the lesson, not just for what they need, which you can, but you also get to personalize or individualize the lesson to tie in things that they like. And my favorite example of this is in our school here in Frisco, Texas. We have a couple of kiddos in the middle school. They're 8th graders this year, and they both love guitars. Now, and when I say they love guitars, I mean they bring their guitars to school and they get here early so they can go into one of the empty classrooms and jam together. And they get together and they talk about all the chords and the new songs they're learning, and they talk about all the artists that they love. I mean, these kids love it. And because we're small on purpose, some of our teachers saw that. And without saying anything to anyone, they didn't even tell me as the administrator, they went and found a lesson that tied in their love of guitar with the topic that they were working on in history. And guess what? Those kids learn that topic in a way they'll never forget now because they're customized based on their desires. It's so cool.
So did they happen to take pictures, video?
We we did. We got some pictures, some video. You can see it on our Instagram page, and it's at Paragon Ed Texas, at Paragon Ed Texas, and it's super cool. That was several months back now, so you have to scroll back a little bit, but definitely a cool thing that we did for them.
It's really interesting. Here in San Diego, they've repurposed some of the old buildings and renovated them. Uh, and one of them here at the beach in Pacific Beach uh, is no longer just a regular public school, it's a music school as part of the educational system. So kids can specialize in music. They still have other courses within that building, but they spend a lot of time studying and talking about and doing music things.
Yeah, I love that. And I just always think back over the last 100 years with the model that we've built in the United States. How many Beethovens did we miss because it's not built for them to focus on music? You know, how many lead guitarists for the new band did we not get to experience because we crammed them into this one size fits all opportunity? And that's what I love is not only are the micro schools and the hybrid schools and the charter schools doing all these different things, but it's forcing the public schools to say, wait a minute, we've got this option called a magnet school that we can do through our district that we can focus now on a school focused on music. And so it's actually making all the different schools better by increasing the opportunities for new innovative school options to pop up, which is just amazing.
So I want to continue with what Gemini fed back to me here on the topic
Okay.
of real, and you had mentioned this in one of your talking points, which we'll get to in just a minute, real life skills, bold, black, and then dot, dot, dot. Teaching, quote, critical life skills, quote, such as financial literacy, communication, self-management, budgeting, and even starting a business. Now, this is paraphrasing what you said.
Yep. Yeah. So interesting. Before we launched our school several years ago, we spent a lot of time talking with other parents in our community, other business owners in our community, and community leaders, and like different elected officials and whatnot. And what we found was there were three main frustrations that all of these stakeholder groups had. And the questions were simple, right? I'm not smart enough to be in depth on this. I said, what do you like about school? What do you not like about the way schools are? And what would you change if you could change it? And then we just use that as a launching point to start the conversation. You know what the first thing almost every one of those people said? I'm frustrated that schools are no longer teaching critical life skills. And I would respond with, well, what do you mean? What does that mean, critical life skills? And they would say, kids are graduating and they don't even know how to budget. Personal finance was the number one reason, almost across the board. Everyone needs to have a budget and know how finance works. They don't know how a mortgage works or how investing works. And they don't teach it in schools, but everyone needs to know that. And so for us, that's something that we said, we've got to fix this. This is a problem. And we're going to make this one of our core pillars. So that's actually our first core pillar at our school. And you've seen it across the nation. There's been legislation to get passed that you have to teach personal finance classes to make sure these kids know these things. Parents are finally realizing, and I was one of those, right? I graduated from the public school and I had no idea how to budget or how to invest or how a mortgage worked. And it's just a crying shame. It's a crying shame.
I learned geography. That was my specialty in the grade schools. I couldn't stand my English teachers, and I didn't do well that, in case you're wondering. But in geography, I got 100%. And because I memorized all the state capitals and the if there's a river. Okay. So
that sure has come in helpful for you on all those opportunities to talk about the state capitals too, hasn't it?
Practical experience. This is again Gemini, and this is just I'm reading this thing. It's almost like kind of paraphrase what you just said. Encourage students, even young ones, to build a real business or project to make learning exciting and build confidence. Exactly.
Yeah. That was our second thing that we found, the second key frustration that parents had, and our community leaders. They would come to me and they would, through that conversation, say, I'm frustrated that schools are no longer teaching students to be effective business employees in the 21st century. And so I started digging on that. I'm like, well, what is it? Why are they not effective employees? And a lot of the people with small businesses in our community said, even when we're getting college graduates, they hand me their diploma or their degree and they say, I know how to do this job. They have the technical skill to understand it, but they don't have the soft skills to be good employees. And I said, well, what does that mean? They're not good teammates. They don't have basic problem solving. There's zero creativity. They don't understand conflict resolution. They don't understand teamwork. So it's this idea of, they grew up with a phone in their hand, and now that they're in a face-to-face environment, it's a completely different world to them that they've never had to experience, right? They're at home on their devices. They go to school. They sit on a device. Now they're standing in a small business, and a customer comes up to ask a question, and they're like, well, I don't know. That's not on an app anywhere. And so, yeah, exactly. And so that's what their frustration was, is we've got to get better at teaching them to be human. We got to teach these kids to be human again, and to know how do you deal with conflict resolution in a workplace. You can't get mad. You can't you can't shout at them. You can't just walk away. We got to deal with it. And so how do we build those skills in to make them effective employees into the future, right? We don't want to set them up for failure. They shouldn't be in entry-level jobs forever, but they're not going to get out of those type of jobs if they don't get some of those soft skills figured out.
Parent-school partnership is the next headline here. Again, it's Gemini. Recognizing that parents have the primary role in their child's education, with the school supporting that role through transparency and regular communication. That sounds like a lot of BS, but what does that mean to you?
Yeah. So we have our orientation every year, and we bring our new families in, and we say, sit down, we're going to talk about this thing. We believe at our school level and in society that you as a parent know your kid better than we do, and that you are ultimately the one responsible for this child. What we don't want to do is we don't want you to just offload your kid into our program and expect us to do everything. Instead, you need to look at us like a tool in your tool belt. Now, we're going to be an incredibly effective tool. We're going to make it as easy as possible for you, but ultimately, you're the one that is using this tool to educate that child. And so at the end of the day, the buck stops with you. And as you see more of these micro schools launching and these hybrid schools launching where they're not at school 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, the parent has to take a more active role in that education. And we'll get to it, I know, here in a few minutes, but there's a few things that we as teachers and administrators of these schools wish that parents knew, because, you ultimately are the responsible party here.
Yeah, I see that, pardon me, I just hit my earplugs here. This is quoting you. We know if you read with your kids at night.
I usually say that and then I laugh big, right? Hey, parents, we know if you're not reading with your kids at night. Because you know what, Ed? We know. We can tell. We can tell when we walk into a classroom which kids are sitting down on their parents' lap as preschoolers and kindergartners and they're reading with their parents. We can tell those second and third graders who have had quality time with a book, with a parent, with an older sibling, with a grandparent. It's noticeable. And I think a lot of parents pretend like they read with their kid because they read a book. There's a huge difference with someone who reads a book or two a week versus the parent who reads a book or two a month or a book or two a year. And I feel like you should know that as a parent. We know without asking you if you're doing that, because the best thing you can do for your child and their long-term future success is read a book with them at home.
So
that's it. That's the number one thing.
Let's interpret that a little bit simpler, perhaps. And I'm a simpleton, so I'm going to ask you the questions. Okay, so now you could tell that because the child is not comfortable, conversant about books or about what they didn't have any questions. They didn't talk about books, so therefore they have no depth. It's it's all been surface, and then there's a lack of parental or grandparents or anybody talking to them about some of the same things that you want them to learn, and they don't know how to express themselves in a comfortable way. Whereas a parent or an aunt or a grandparent would be more loving or more sympathetic and help them understand why it's important.
That's a part of it. If you'll allow me, there's two sides to this story. The first side is the technical side. When a student reads with a parent out loud, those kids come in and they have better pronunciation and they have a deeper level of base knowledge in conversation, right? Because when you read those children's books, especially, they're very simple, but you learn a lot about context, right? Like, for instance, my daughter, who is in second grade this year, I remember last year we read a book about all the things in a refrigerator. Now, that seems simple, but what is she doing? She's learning that different things can go in the refrigerator, and she's learning that some things don't go in the refrigerator. She's learning that the refrigerator can keep things cold, or a refrigerator can keep things frozen. She learned that there are certain things you don't want in the refrigerator because it actually impacts whatever it is. And the example that they used was someone put syrup in the freezer. Well, you can't pour syrup if it's frozen. And so that is now adding to her vocabulary, but also her understanding of the world around her. And when someone comes and says a word and it's wrong, she immediately catches, well, I've heard that word before because it was in a book that I read. And so now she's like, okay, that was pronounced incorrectly. And the dad in me loves when they say things wrong because it's so cute, right? I love it. One of my kids, when they say I'm so tough, they used to say I'm so tough. And I just love that because this is so cute. Nobody else says I'm so tough. And one day as we were reading a book about, the big guy on campus, he was so tough. And my son said, what does that mean? And I said, well, it means he's so tough. And it killed me because now he doesn't say I'm so tough anymore. He says I'm so tough. And so, but that's the kind of thing that we can tell. Additionally, we know when the kid starts reading, and actually, like, now you're in kindergarten, now you're in first grade, moving from picture books to books with more words. We can tell because there's a comfort having a book in your hand, and there's an excitement about finishing the book as opposed to a drudgery. Oh, I have to get through this whole book. So those are the first two. The third and final piece is there's this idea when you are reading with your child every night, how do you say it? I'm trying to figure out how to not do education jargon here. There's an understanding of big concepts in simple packages. And when that kid comes on site, they are able to retain information in a different way than the kids who they don't have a parent reading with them. And they're able to regurgitate things that they've heard in other contexts and connect those two things that seemingly are not connected, but having that context at the base level allows them to connect those thoughts. And children who have not grown up with lots of books struggle to connect desperate thoughts into a cohesive, oh, well, if that happened over here, I bet that also happens over here in this situation. And so those are kind of the technical side. But then you also add in just the love of reading, right? These kids who grew up with books are always looking for the next book. And it really leads into the second piece. We know if you're reading with your kids at night. And then for those of you who are, we also know if you're good at finding books that your kids like to read. My oldest son, he's an 8th grader this year, voracious reader. He puts his hands to a book and he'll finish it in 2 to 3 days. These big, thick, multi-chapter, no picture books, right? Until you get him one that he just doesn't care about. He'll get 3, 4 chapters in. He's like, nah, this one's not interesting to me. But you get something, he loves World War II books. He loves them. He'll read those all day long. But if you give him a book about a Barbie, you give him a book about, basketball. He's a hockey player. You give him a book about basketball, he's like, yeah, okay. You put something with Wayne Gretzky on the title, the kid's going to read every word, every page, the entire way through. And so those are two things that we as instructional people wish that parents knew. We can tell if you're putting books in your kids' hands that they like, and we know both in the kindergarten all the way up through junior high, through high school, we know if you are reading with them when they were younger.
That's great. And I just want to add that going back to the early part of the conversation here about the story you just mentioned, one of the stories about you don't put syrup in the freezer because it's going to freeze. And so that is learning something about the impact of the freezer. And certain foods, certain things don't like that. They're better left in the refrigerator. And why do you put things on ice is to preserve whatever, the flavor or the well-being of that food that you want to eat sometime. So that cognitive ability, in other words, understanding stuff in nature, that's a lifelong learning. You wonder where that came from. Well, it probably came from the story, like you're just telling, something simple like that, and then you went much deeper, and I really appreciate that. So, what does ESA mean?
ESA stands for Education Savings Account. And an education savings account is really interesting. What we found is there's people who, when talking about ESAs, they'll say, oh, it's a voucher. Well, it's really not a voucher. These are two very different vehicles that, yes, do they accomplish similar things? Sure. But are they the same thing? No. So let me break it down. There's new things here. The first is an education savings account. This is your taxpayer funds that you, as a tax-paying citizen of the United States, put towards education. You can use your ESA dollars, which, for sake of illustration, let's just say it's like a credit card, right? You get your amount of dollars on this card and you can swipe it at different places. So you could come to a school like ours and say, I'm going to pay some of my tuition with this ESA money. I'm going to go to a tutoring place. I'm going to swipe it and use some of this money to pay for tutoring for little Johnny. You could go to a music studio and say, I want additional music support. I'm going to swipe my card at this music school and get them some enrichment opportunities. Lots of different ways you can use ESA dollars. Then you compare that to vouchers. Vouchers is wildly different. Think of vouchers like a coupon. If I take my voucher or my coupon to Chase's school, I hand over the coupon. The school would take the coupon and go back to the government and say, I need the funding for this student who I'm educating. And they give the money. It's only good for tuition. It's only good for one location. Now, when you compare those two things, they're wildly different. One, yes, it pays for tuition, but the other one puts the parent fully in control of that student's entire educational journey because they can use it in different places, in different amounts, and in different ways. And so from a parent perspective, big fan of ESAs. This is a game changer for parents, which I love. Then there's the third one that it's sometimes talked about, not as prevalent right now, but it's tax credit scholarships. And I don't love this model as much. Oklahoma passed the tax credit scholarship a couple years back. And basically how it works there is the parent has to come up with, I don't know, I can't remember the number. Let's say $7,000, right? They pay their tuition or all these different things for $7,000, and then they get to write that money off of their taxes. Well, if we're looking at who is that benefiting, that's not benefiting the families who couldn't afford to find $7,000 somewhere to go spend it. So that's really only benefiting the middle class and up. That's why I like ESAs and vouchers better, because it helps the people who otherwise couldn't afford to go to the school that's right for their kid. But now with an ESA, they can, or now with a voucher, they can.
So it's an equalizer.
Yeah. It creates that opportunity where parents are like, I would love to send my kid there, but I can't. Well, now you can. Now you can afford to do that with this ESA or voucher money.
Chase, this is really informative. Thank you. Reinforcing learning at home through chores, cooking, aligned reading, or budgeting. So do you do that with your kids? You've got a second grader and an eighth grader. That's different chores.
Yeah, and there's a fifth grader in there as well. So I've got the whole gamut. Yeah, this really goes back to one of the things we already talked about, right? With critical life skills. What I like to do is I like to encourage parents to realize that we're not raising kids. And I'm preaching to the choir here, right? I'm talking to myself. We're not raising kids. We're raising adults. But if we don't train the kids, we're not going to have an effective adult. And so if you want an 18-year-old who knows how to cook, you got to have the 8-year-old start learning the basics of cooking and practice those skills for the next decade. And then when you have an 18-year-old, you'll have an 18-year-old who knows how to take care of themselves. If you want to have an 18-year-old who's graduating and leaving school and leaving your home, going to college, that knows how to clean up after themselves, you got to teach your 8-year-old how to clean their bedroom so that they have 10 years to practice with you, so that when they're 18, they know how to clean up after themselves. And this teaches a lot of things. It teaches self-discipline. It teaches respect. And it teaches the skills that you need to know in a controlled environment where they're allowed to fail. And you should let them fail, right? I think of my second grader. Sometimes her rotation to clean the bathroom, the kids all have like their own little bathroom off to the side, and she does not do a good job sometimes. And that's a good thing, because then it allows my wife or myself to come in and say, okay, honey, you actually didn't even scrub the toilet. And I can tell. You know how I can tell? Look at all this stuff here. You didn't wipe this down. The sink has water spots all over. The mirror has streaks in it. So let me show you how to do it. And so I can show her, you got to get all the streaks out of the mirror. Okay, now I did the first half to show you. You got to do the second half to prove to me that you know how to do it. And it allows that child over time, and again, in a controlled environment. We don't want them to fail at 19 when we don't have any ability to help them anymore. I want them to fail when they're 10 so that I can give that advice, guidance, and pre-planning for the next time. And I think the one step, Ed, that a lot of parents miss out on right here is that they want their kid to fail, but they don't plan for their kid to fail. The expectation should be that they're going to fail, so that when they fail, you don't get mad, you don't get angry, you don't, shoot off the rails and say, well, I can't believe you didn't do it. You say, I knew this was coming. Now, let's talk about why didn't this work? How do I get them to know how to do it right next time? And you know what? That is really hard. And I fail at that all the time. But if we can figure out that they're going to fail, and this is a learning opportunity to teach them how to do it better next time, they're going to be successful 18-year-olds who graduate and leave our homes. And that actually will reinforce the things that we're learning at school. Why? Because now they have respect at the schoolroom. When they drop their trash on the floor at the school, they don't just walk away from it. They stop and they pick up their trash and put it away, because it's a respect thing. So just like I know if you're teaching your kid to read and love books at an early age, I also know I could with pretty good certainty determine if your kid's bedroom is clean or dirty based on how they treat and respect the schoolhouse, which is something that I don't think a lot of parents think about.
Wow. Okay, so in the last series that we produced together, going back 2, 3 years ago, which I'm grateful for, by the way, and uh, you introduced me to Tamara in Arizona, and she was starting this small school, micro school, and there are different age kids in the same schoolroom. Is that still working?
It is, and it's making a huge comeback. There's a lot of new research that's come out that shows putting students in different age groups in the same classrooms and groupings actually helps students learn better. And it's interesting because, and we do that. Let me back up. We do this at our school here. I know Tamara does it in Arizona. For us, I'll give you our example just because I know it a lot better. We build out classrooms based on groupings of grade bands. So think kinder, first, and second is one. Third, fourth, and fifth is the second. Sixth, seventh, eighth is another. And then ninth, 10th, 11th, and 12th. Okay, so let's go with 4, 5, 6. We put 4, 5, and 6 in the same class. I'm actually at the school right now. I can see the classroom where all of those groups would be. They'd start in this classroom. And then for us, we break into not math grade 4, grade 5, and grade 6. We break into math blue, math yellow, math green. Now, those are aligned to those different grade levels. But what we do is when students come to us, we measure where are they? What do they know? Okay, great. Now we know that each class might have, let's say math yellow might have a kid who's on grade level. It might have a student who's behind, and it might have a student who's ahead. So that's 3 different grade levels in the same class because that's where they actually are. And then, but they will never know. They just think, well, this is my math class, right? But they don't know there's a third, fourth, fifth, and a sixth grader all in the same classroom. Then they go back to their class. The hub is what we call it, the main area. And then they split for science. And that science class would have different kids based on where they come to us, and we get them to a mastery level. Now, the one thing that people always say is, how do you deal with the kid who's behind? You're just going to leave them behind forever? No. What we do is they're where they should be based on what they know. And then we bring them in for individualized, there's that buzzword again from earlier, individualized tutoring. So they're starting where they are and working forward. And then we catch them up throughout the year in this separate individualized instructional plan. You just can't do that with classes of 30. But if we have only 10 to 12 kids in that grade level, we can do it, and we can do it effectively. And we get the kid not only where they are to where they should be, but caught up completely to grade level appropriate work by the end of the year.
Now, to what extent, rather than guess, I'm just going to ask the question to be told. Okay. To what extent are the kids benefiting from maturity development from being in that mixture?
Yeah, it's great. Here's what's really wonderful about it. And here's where a lot of the data that I didn't have pulled up, so I can't give you the specific numbers, but I'll give you the overview. What we've seen is when there's a kid who's 2, 3 grade levels ahead, they get to be the one. And for us, we make the older kids sit up in the front rows and the younger kids behind them. Because we want the younger kids to mimic what they're seeing in front of them, right? If we have a multiple in that classroom at one time. And so first they get to see a more mature student ahead of them, but then that mature student, instead of coming down to their level, they're actually being able to be helpful in the classroom and say, hey, I actually studied that last year. And I know the teacher's over there working with that kid, so let me just help you with this really quick. That reinforcement of them explaining that information to another student, now it's peer-to-peer learning, which shoots retention up on both parties exponentially. But the most interesting thing, if a student that's a sixth grader can explain to the fourth grader their content level, it's like 90 something percent retention and understanding, which we would call mastery. It's not just I know the content, I know it well enough to explain it to another student. And what you see is if the student can only get halfway there and they say, now that we're halfway through this math problem, I can't remember the next step. Excuse me, Mrs. Whatever, Mrs. Smith, can you come and help the last step of this? What you see through the research is the fourth grader got the first half from a student. The older student gave them the first half, but now both of them have learned the second step because now it's personal. I'm helping. And if I want to help again next time, I got to remember this. So I'm going to listen as the sixth grader working on the fourth grade lesson real quick, helping that student. I'm going to remember that next time. And they actually reinforce their learning in a completely different way than you could ever do with one teacher in front of 20 kids in the classroom.
So that's brilliant. And I'm really happy to hear that. So this is a total learning experience that builds trust, intergenerational, interage, not generational, trust and friendship rather than zero connection with a younger brother or older sister, which is what I know I missed that. Because then you come back in the home at dinner or whatever, and who's this person? And they're looking at me like, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely changes it. It changes it from an instructional level. It changes it from a maturity level. And it changes that relationship from a personal level, right? You have that experience now with that person who it might not be something instructional next time. It might be like, hey, I just need to talk to someone and I trust you because you helped me with my work. Here's my problem. Can you help me figure this out? And it might be something completely not related at all. But now they have that extra person that they can go to and lean on and help them through whatever it is that they're going through. And a lot of times that's, what public schools would call social emotional issues. It could be a whole host of things. It could, hey, I've got this problem with my little, middle school crush. What should I do? And they've got another person who's been there and can give some advice. So it's creating a culture of respect again with people now and trust.
Chase, this has really been a great show. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, always happy to be here.
See you next time. Good luck.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Ed. Appreciate it. Is there anything else that I can do for you?
I'll send you the show. Then we could have a debrief.
Sounds good.
Okay, pal. Ciao.
Bye-bye.